Let's be real. The status quo has created a lot of the world's problems, and we can't rely on business as usual to get us out of this mess we're in. That's why we're partnering with Think NATO this season. It's a dead simple 4-step process to blow open conventional thinking and get to truly unique and innovative ideas. It's not about finding the perfect answer. It's about starting with the right questions, pushing the edges, and then taking action. You can learn more about Think NATO at thinknato.com. That's ThinkNADO.com. Think NATO, the positive action engine.
Today, we're tackling a challenge every designer faces. How do you actually nudge decision makers toward climate action? My guest Stevie Bales and I explore why values get disconnected from workplace decisions, dream up everything from climate designer galas to universal iconography systems, and land on something surprisingly simple that any designer can do right now. Let's get to it. Hey Stevie, how's it going?
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's been a long week, if I'm being honest. I'm finally off
Yeah.
of and out of school, and I think I'm just tired, and I'm coming to the end of that first week of like sleeping regularly.
Nice. Well, for those who don't know, Stevie is a design educator, so coming off of spring semester, right?
Yes. The longer semester, I always feel like.
I'm hoping today's Think NATO session will inject some new, fresh energy in you. So let's get started. So, Stevie, I'd love to have you share a little bit about yourself and your role within climate designers.
Yeah. So as you were saying before, I'm a design educator. I teach at a small liberal arts, like true liberal arts, I always say that, university in the middle of Missouri, actually. And not probably a place that most people would presume that somebody who is very pro climate design would live. I presume. But I have probably had that sort of thought process in the back of my brain for most of my life, so much so that I actually started in theater and left theatrical design when I felt like it didn't align with my personal values and I couldn't find where that intersection happened. As far as my role within climate designers, I actually am a part of the New Wave research team, and we are currently phasing ourselves into New Wave 2.0. I can't give you a ton of details about what that looks like yet, because even I don't know all the way, but we are working towards understanding education and more specifically higher education, but I think that it will filter into other forms of education as we keep going, and how we can actually teach climate design to everyone, every designer that we talk to, every designer that we are pushing through the system, or in my case, every non-designer who happens to be in a design class, because I think it's important for them to think of themselves in similar ways to us, even if they just find out that we're there to support them through whatever it is that they're working on. And right now, we've kind of found ourselves in a crossroads where the previous iterations of this project has constantly researched students, and we keep getting the same answers. So clearly, there is some sort of disconnect between what students think they understand about climate design and what we as the educators know to be true, and also their ability to feel comfortable and confident in having climate design sort of in their back pocket is something they can always reach for. And I think because I am an educator now, I am very attached to that concept of whether or not we can actually make this a bigger, better system for everyone involved. And so, how do we change the face of design education, if you will, to make it climate accessible all the time? Like, it shouldn't be a question anymore.
Love it. As a fellow design educator myself, and I've said this plenty of times during a lot of these episodes, let's go upstream and really affect change from within these institutions. And if we are graduating young designers, new designers, let's by default have them think about this, right? As opposed to it being an add-on or a nice to have. Love that response, Stevie. And we'll obviously link New Wave in the show notes here. A question I love asking every guest before we get started is, how is climate action showing up in your work?
Oh, well, I mean, step one, I'm a design educator who actively tries to teach climate design in the classroom. Second to that, though, I have tried to be as embedded in the climate design and sort of just like climate action culture locally as I can be, which again, I will remind everybody I'm living in Missouri. It is not exactly a blue haven for this. But I'm a part of a CSA, like a local farm CSA, who's very pro permaculture ideology and climate action and how do we grow for lots of people with small amounts of space. And so I buy food from them, but we also are required to work on the farm, which is its own interesting endeavor, and I enjoy that. I'm also heavily embedded in the environmental ambassadorship group that's on campus. So I'm a part of that, which actually directly communicates with the president of the university, which is a pretty interesting way for that to be organized. And there's a lot of different people there, and that makes it very fun. And then I guess for me, my other big action is that my work here lately has been, for lack of any other way to put it, very propaganda-ish. Both for climate action, both and various other things happening with our government. I'm not going to get too political about it, but it is one of those situations where you've got a government who's like actively going against everything I believe to be valuable. So a lot of my actual design work has sort of tried to push the fact that that's happening and that we should do something about it.
Great. Thanks for that. Yeah. So much to unpack there that could be their own episodes. But
Yes.
we'll have to invite you back to talk more about our current administration in the White House. Anyway, different podcast episode. Moving on here. So a challenge that I would love to bring to this conversation is one that I think can be applied to design education, but also can be applied to really all across design disciplines and within the design industry. And this is something that I've heard a lot of people within the community ask and discuss amongst themselves and each and other folks, any especially even their clients. The challenge that I see is not knowing designers not knowing how to nudge decision makers towards climate action, right? So I would love to spend the next couple of minutes with you, Stevie, figuring out how can designers really nudge those decision makers to make the most appropriate design decisions, right? So when I talk about decision makers, I'm talking about leaders, founders, managers, clients, and maybe in your case, it could be department chairs, right? And then climate action, we hear that phrase all the time. And I'm sure people have lots of definitions. But when I think of climate action in this context, again, how can designers nudge decision makers towards climate action? When I think of climate action, I'm talking about big action, small action, dependent on maybe what your studio, how your studio is operating, maybe what the team is doing, what services you offer. And then in your case with design education, it could be curriculum building. It could be the types of projects that are being delivered within each and every class, right? So I would love to take this challenge and walk through the Think NATO process with you to come up with, something that we can maybe do, whether you're a design educator or a design manager running a small design team or anyone else, making those big decisions. So let's get into the Think NATO process. So with step one here, we have wait why. And this is the doom part of doom and bloom. This is where we unpack the current reality. This is when we start to question the status quo. We want to be that relentless toddler where we're asking why so many times, right? So let's go deep and figuring out why designers are not able to influence or persuade those decision makers in climate action. So let's maybe preface each of these prompts as wait wise as far as calling out the obvious. So I'll start here. Wait, why are designers unable to persuade their leaders? Like that's an obvious one, right? That's just kind of manipulating the challenge at hand. But, what is the thing that's preventing them from even just bringing up these better design decisions?
Wait, why do we want to persuade decision makers as if they aren't regular people who also need to understand climate action the same way as everyone else? Because my big one for that thought process is like, these are people just like everyone else is people. And if I can come at them as a regular person, I think I can have a better, stronger conversation with them than acting like they're bigger or higher or further up or have more anything than I do. That kind of idea.
Wait, why are we treating these climate focused design decisions as that? I'm wondering if we can get to the core of values of what the people that we're working with, these decision makers and others, believe in, and lead with that, right? So like, wait, why do we separate values out of our workplace? Why do we separate values out of the workplace so that we treat them separately? Could we incorporate values more in those decisions that we make?
Mm-hmm. Wait, why don't we place our values alongside all of our other decision-making processes beyond just climate action? I feel like there's that ideology in certain spheres to make things value-driven, and then in other spheres we disconnect them from each other. Like I'm thinking about like that ideology of branding, everything goes back to values and the understanding of what you are branding, and why don't we treat everything that way?
Mm-hmm. You can go on most design studio websites. I mean, really any company website, and you would find their section or even a page dedicated to values. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just wondering, how often do they actually like work within those values, make those decisions based on those values? Like how much of it is just for show? How much of it is actually like deep rooted in every single decision that they make, right? Um,
That also goes back to that point of wait, why are we putting on this show of values if they aren't truly what we care about or want to be something that we utilize all of the time?
mm, love it. Love it.
Mhm.
I think we got a lot to play with. I would love to move on to step two. Maybe
Mhm.
it's possible. And this is really where we explore possibilities to help us explore the edges of what is possible, to crack the door open to see a world that could exist, right? So the word maybe provides the freedom to link unlikely outcomes, goals, or possibilities to do something else. But a quick note here, though, that we want to hold off on coming up with solutions just yet. That's going to be the next step. But this is really just us showing what we could do based on the previous step, the wait why step. So with these points and wait why statements that we came up with, what is possible, right? So maybe it's possible that we as the humans engaging with the product, service, and experience of whatever companies we engage with, right? So, what are the things that we, as the people engaging with the product, service, and experience, how can we hold those companies accountable for the values that are displayed on their website so that we know that we're engaging with a company that truly means what they say they mean, right? And act in a way that they are saying on their website and in their marketing materials.
I also think maybe it's possible to expand conceptually the idea of values. And by expand, I actually mean simplify, I guess, down to values that are more inherently specific or are easier to understand. I think a lot of companies get away with doing what they do as they are and maintaining the status quo because they put a lot of flowery language around it, and people don't quite recognize what that means.
And coming back to designers with the original challenge, how can designers nudge decision makers towards climate action? Maybe it's possible for designers to come up with their own set of values
Mhm.
and display that proudly and often,
Mhm, mhm.
where anything that comes across their radar as something to do for their company or for a client, it gets cross-checked with that. Right. And so as a manager, as a leader of a team, I know certain people or the team in general, I know their values, they wear them on their sleeves. And as a manager, as a leader, I'm able to then understand how and where, and maybe even if my team shows up to this work.
Yeah.
And could we make decisions? Again, if I'm playing that studio founder, studio leader role as a studio, do we even say yes to this project?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't align with the values that not just the company has, but the individuals within what they have as well.
Yeah, and maybe it's possible as designers to take that a step further and make this system of having values worn proudly, if you will. We kind of take it the initiative upon ourselves to be the force of change, right? If one person does it, then the next person does it. And if we sort of make a statement in the design community that we are always going to do this, maybe we can then spearhead change for all of those other decision makers who we don't necessarily have connection to each and every day to make similar adjustments, right? Like we get new technology or we get a new way of communicating, and then all of a sudden one person absorbs it, and then the next person, and then the next person, and before you know it, the whole world's doing it, kind of thing. Maybe we as a community, because we're not small, can make that adjustment and maybe it carries forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to take a little bit off of that and riff off of that. You're making me think also, and this has been brought up in previous episodes. Many design disciplines have these lettered acronym associations, right? I'm not going to name any because,
Yes.
whatever, but, we all know who they are. We have them for interaction design. We have them for graphic design. We have them for, lots of other design disciplines. Could these types of associations with their pull, with their presence, with their history, can they provide a set of values aligned with climate action that they can then use to promote within their memberships, right? And maybe even can they all come together, these associations come together as a meeting of the families, right? Could they come together and create kind of an overarching set of values that can then be kind of trickled down to the individual designer, or at least just suggestions on values, right? That individual designers may want to incorporate in their work, so that, again, this goes back to the original prompt here: how can designers nudge decision makers towards climate action? Can those values be backed by these design associations enough to where designers feel like they have a voice and that their voice is backed by others, and that is enough for them to feel confident and comfortable pushing towards climate action, whether it's suggesting of materials, suggesting of certain technologies, whether it's promoting certain strategies that are all climate focused, that are all climate minded, right?
Maybe it's also possible that then those organizations sort of create a trickle down effect into the way design education is produced, right?
Right.
Because that's immediately where my brain goes. Is like, oh, now you've
Yep.
got these higher organizations that kind of tell you that this is the way design works, and then it kind of gets the full effect of backing all the way up into the initial start of where you learn design, how you learn design, what is it that we do, what do we think about, what's in the cycle, that little graph of divergent versus convergent thinking, and how does that then get affected by all of these other things that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, let's move on to step 3. And with step 3, this is where we bust out the Think NATO toolkit, and we're going to randomly pull out 2 cards, Stevie, and we're going to use these cards in coming up with ideas for this next step, the what if step. So these cards are going to help us move past our biases to allow the most creative, outlandish, and wild ideas to emerge. And if we don't do this, we're just going to go back to our mental filing cabinet of existing ideas and biases that will just eventually produce expected, traditional, normal ideas. And the whole point of the Think NATO process and the whole point of having these conversations is for us to come up with something completely different that we can then, potentially implement, that can then move the needle when it comes to, in this case, the challenge here, having designers be able to nudge decision makers towards climate action. So with these two cards, we can use these two cards literally, or just use them as inspiration. It's totally up to us, totally up to how we want to interpret each of these cards. So with that, Stevie, I'm going to present the first set of cards. So I have 3 in my hand, left, middle, and right. So out of these 3 options, which one would you want to select?
Left.
The left one? Okay.
Mhm.
We have an image of shipping cargo cranes you see in ports along the coast, lifting up all the shipping containers off of cargo ships. Okay. So let's go back to the second deck. So again, left, middle, and right. Go ahead and pick a card.
We're going to pick left again.
Left. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. All right. We got fancy. We got the word fancy.
Oh,
So we have fancy shipping container cranes. Okay. So Stevie, you can swap out just one of these cards for another, or you can keep them. What do you want to do?
let's just keep them.
Keep them. Love it.
It's an interesting one. Let's keep them.
Let's roll with it. So again, we can use these literally or just as inspiration. We don't have to use them as they appear on the cards, but we have, again, fancy shipping container cranes. I see them a lot in Oakland when I head to the East Bay. So this is a
Where
normal
I
sight
live,
for me.
I never see them. So it's an interesting thought.
There's not a whole lot of coastline in Missouri, right?
No. There is the Mississippi River, but you don't often get the cranes there.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so step 3, we have the what if step. So this is the idea phase. This is the bloom part in doom and bloom. So this is when we start to come up with an idea that is not in existence, right? This is where we want to dream big and get weird. We're going to use our imagination to come up with unexpected connections so that we can address the challenge at hand. Think of this as the creative engine behind the Think NATO process. So with that, again, just to remind our listeners, we are addressing the challenge here. How can designers nudge decision makers towards climate action? So with everything that we've discussed so far in step 1 and step 2, how can we use fancy shipping container cranes? How can we use that as inspiration to address the challenge based on what we've talked about?
Going back to our idea of sort of wearing our values on our sleeves, and I'm also thinking to the UN sustainability goal icons that they have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What if we develop some sort of collective system that makes it really easy for you to establish the kind of designer you are? Like, I fit in category 5 and 7, and these are the things I always do. And you can sort of utilize them as a mechanism to kind of, again, proudly display who you are and state to others, like, this is the kind of work you're going to get from these are the kind of projects I take on, this is the kind of stuff I do. And that it's really simple, as in the ability to kind of pick and choose is just like pick and choose, just grab the ones that you feel the most compelled to have. And that it still allows for you to have some individualism, but at the same time, it's more of a mechanism to proclaim to everybody else, like, this is who I am, this kind of designer I want to be, or this is the kind of design project you're working on in a class or something, where you kind of focus on each of these.
It's funny, I was thinking something similar, right? Wearing something on your sleeves. And as designers, we love making t-shirts, right? So could this be a line of clothing? Could this be a clothing brand where you have maybe one value per shirt, and you wear one value a day, Monday through Friday at the studio, if you go to the studio? It might be remote, but yeah, could there be visual things. I don't want to say swag, but merch, I guess. Could there be merch, right? Shirts,
Yeah.
coffee mugs, whatever. And I'm not saying it just to make stuff, as
Mhm.
designers, we want to be conscious of what we make and produce. But, again, as a brainstorming, podcast, let's just kind of dream big and then kind of bring it down to earth. But yeah, just what is the thing that can display the values up front and center? And then that's on the individual level. And then team level, studio level, company level, what does that look like separate from your website? Like, do you create content? Do you develop blog posts? Do you develop LinkedIn posts? Do you develop a podcast of your own? Whatever, to again underscore your values so that you can, as a team, come together to then nudge decision makers on the client side. Like, hey, you want to work with this studio? You got to listen to this episode of our podcast. And maybe it's just one episode and that's it. It's not even a podcast. It's just an audio recording. It could be a Zoom call, whatever. Listen to this, watch this, read this. And if you're down with what we believe are our true values as individuals, as a team, then come work with us. Right. So it's a
Mhm.
way for folks to just project the values into the world so that people know what they're signing up for.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sitting here looking at a couple of these buttons that my students made of their work. And I'm like, it's kind of a similar concept. It's just like a clothing button I can like wear publicly, but then it's like a button that I can like post in various places or utilize in various mechanisms and content forms. I'm going back to that concept of fancy though, and my brain is like, how do I make that more fancy? And again, I know it's not a have to, but I also want to recognize that maybe that's a conceptual framework that we as people like like human beings like when things are fancy or
Mm.
simple or specific, right? And I'm like, how can we be more fancy with this concept? Because I think it's fair to say that systems like this do exist, but we're not using them or we're not proudly displaying them. So what makes them more fancy?
Mm-hmm. You're making me think of what if there's an annual gala,
Yeah, I was going that direction too. Yeah.
like the Met Gala, right? Crazy ass costumes, wild outfits, but it's not just the show up in a fancy attire. It's showing up as a way to underscore these, again, values, beliefs, this future vision that as designers, as creatives, we want to take part in, and we want others to know that we're doing this. So, join us or not join us, right? And so that when it is time, again, going back to the original challenge, when it is time to present a uncomfortable idea or a more expensive option or whatever, like, the people who actually at the end of the day make those design decisions will know that this is the better decision because they understand the importance of this decision because of the people presenting it. But yeah, anyway, yes, fancy gala once a year thing. Again, maybe we work with the design associations. Maybe it's a climate designers gala. What would that look like? What would a climate designers gala look like in the year 2025?
Yes, and I also then question sort of that, and not question, I guess what I mean is like I look at it and I go, how do we use that as a mechanism to frame ourselves as the expert in this
Hmm.
particular
Yeah.
instance, which I think is a very interesting way to do it, and certainly goes back to that concept of wearing our values proudly and sort of branding ourselves in a specific direction that makes everyone very aware that that's who we are. But then the flip side of that is, what if it's not a gala and what if it's not fancy? What if it's a very matter of fact system that's so simple that like it becomes a part of everyday life? Like you were saying, like it could be on t-shirts, but I'm also thinking like, what if it's iconography that you see so regularly that you no longer question it? Like the iconography system we use for roadways. What if it becomes so not fancy and so utilitarian that we don't even question it? We just go, if you are using that icon, you know what you're talking about. Just like if I see a yield sign, it doesn't matter if it's written in Icelandic, I still know it says yield.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, lots of great ideas here. Maybe this is the time to go into our last step, the try this step.
Mm.
And this is where we want to then break down one or some of these ideas and just do something with them, right? Like, what are those small bets that we can create, those small actions that we can create and try, quote unquote, on Monday? And so, based on whether it's this gala idea, whether it's these icons, whether it's just these t-shirts, what do we want to try out that uses minimal resources and just to see what gains traction, right? Like, think of this as a prototype and test approach where we can put it out in the world and test if people actually are gravitating towards this.
Hmm.
And you can learn a lot from all of this and then reiterate, or I'm sorry, and then iterate more and more and then make this into the bigger thing. So of course, whatever ideas we land with in the next couple of minutes, we would want to encourage, if anyone wants to take this and run with it themselves, we would want to encourage you all to do your own research to ensure that what you're actually trying is the better option and that is actually needed and it actually solves the problem. This is just a quick little brainstorm session. So of course, doing your own research is going to be helpful in this step. But yeah, I think we have plenty of ideas to choose from, Stevie. What would you want to try out?
So I immediately wish that school wasn't over whenever I was doing this because now I want to turn that entire iconography ideology into an assignment just to see what
Oh, there you
students
go.
come up with, right?
Love
Because
it. Yeah.
I find that I often have these really particular ideas, and then I get a student who's like level one in design, and their brain has not been sort of quote unquote molded into shape yet. And so their
Mm,
ideas are still so far-fetched and out there that I'm always very interested to see what they come up with. But
mm.
I can't do that on Monday unless we're counting Monday in August. Like,
Sure. Sure. Yeah. No, I love the idea and bringing it back to design education and
mhm.
using students who are still forming themselves, still forming their sense of the world, and especially the design industry. I love that idea. I think the thing that I would do, no matter what the final thing is, whether it's icons, shirts, gala,
Yeah.
I would probably put together, this is not the sexiest, coolest idea, but some sort of way to capture what those values are. Like, are there a set of universal values that designers tend to have? So that can look like in the form of a survey, or it could be interviews, it could be maybe some webinar, or not webinars, but like virtual calls to bring folks together to just start to have a conversation. And maybe what starts to surface would be these global universal values. And then from there, we can start with those, right? So that we know what icons or what t-shirts we need to design.
Yeah, and I also think with that, I would add like not just interviews or a survey amongst designers. I'm also interested to know what the stakeholders feel their values are. But I think that I would want to check in with the stakeholders on what their values are too, because I feel like in many places, it's not that their values are so much different than ours, it's that there's a disconnect between how they think our values will meet their values.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because I wanted to bring those folks back into the conversation too. The people on the other end of those decisions, right? The
Mhm.
clients, the colleagues, the chairs, the deans within design schools. I think that's a great approach. What are the values that they have, and then how much overlap do we see? And then from there, it might not be a hard thing to implement because there could be, based on this little bit of research, there could be a lot of overlap that this might not be a hard thing to implement. But without having those conversations, we don't know what the other person is thinking or feeling or believing in. And if we don't have those conversations, then we could be sitting on a really great idea and a really simple way of making these decisions. But if again we don't have those conversations, we're missing so much opportunity there.
Yeah, I do think it's a lot more overlap than we recognize. I think in general, when we talk about climate action, we're not just talking about the big scary words, right? We're talking about the
Mhm.
small things. And I think it's very simple for us as designers to look at this and go, well, I'm for all of those things that you're for, but if somebody doesn't understand where those elements overlap, they don't get that connection point. And I also think that by Monday I could like sit around and just talk to some of those stakeholders that I do on a I'm literally going to meet one of those after this call. Like I could literally just sit down and be like, what are the values you have in design and design education in general, because I can go talk to my department chair, figure out where my overlap is with theirs and how those are not mutually exclusive, and they are instead a connective, cohesive community of things that we both want.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think you said it just now. At the end of the day, I'm going to say most human beings. I want to say
Yes.
all, but
Yes.
there's always a few. But yeah, I think the majority of human beings, we all want the same thing. We all want to be safe. We all want to be secure. We all want to love, and we all want to be in community with each other. I mean, all of that is like just what we have always wanted and have had
Mhm.
for millennia as a species evolving in this world. And so who would be against any of that? I think it's just a matter of having those conversations to make sure everyone's on the same page so that we can make better design decisions as designers, so that we can achieve that end result, like the product, service, or experience that a company is wanting to implement. I think many of the cases it's the end result. The end result is the benefit of those products, services, and experiences. So getting on the same page there is super key. With that, Stevie, this was really fun. I appreciate our conversation. I want to just provide you with an opportunity to leave us anything you want to promote, an idea that maybe you wanted to revisit, a plug for something that you're currently working on as we wrap up here. So hand it over to you.
I think it's very interesting that the conversation started where it did and ended where it did, in that ultimately this all kind of goes back to New Wave. And I didn't do that
Sure,
intentionally.
sure, yeah.
But as we got to the end, I realized, oh, this whole entire conversation we're having is literally what I think New Wave 2.0 is going to be about, is having those conversations, finding that overlap, figuring out what me and the New Wave team want as design education is in fact what design educators who maybe aren't a part of the New Wave team also want, and that ultimately we're both headed towards the same goal. And I think that that's both incredibly validating, but also reminds me of just how simple solving a problem like this can be at the end of the day. Like, it feels big, bold, scary, overwhelming. There's too much. There's so many things. But that if you have more conversations, you're much more likely to get somewhere.
What a great place to stop. Thanks, Stevie. I appreciate it. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Stevie and I started with a complex challenge about influencing decision makers, but we ended up discovering the solution might actually be really, really simple. Just having more conversations. How many times do we assume we know what our clients, our bosses, our department chairs actually value? How often do we create elaborate strategies to convince people when we haven't even asked them what they care about? Our climate breakdown demands speed, but it also demands connection. We can't design our way out of this alone in our studios, classrooms, or agencies. The real work happens when we step outside our design bubble and discover that most people, yes, even the decision makers we think are against us, actually want the same things we do: safety, security, community. But here's the urgent part. Every day we delay these conversations is another day we're not leveraging the massive overlap that already exists between our values and theirs. The iconography, the galas, the manifestos, they're all just tools. The real innovation is realizing that the person across the table from you probably isn't your enemy. So ask the question, what do you actually value? You might be surprised by the answer, and that answer might just be the fastest path to climate action. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Doom and Bloom. A big thank you to the incredible team behind the podcast: Camille Graham, Jacqueline Demshek, Holden Hardcastle, and our music producer, Albert Paul. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and definitely share it with someone who can use a little bloom in their life. Follow us on Instagram at climatedesignersorg, and don't forget to tag us in your projects. We'd love to see how our episodes inspire you. You can also email us at hello@climatedesigners.org to share how you're turning inspiration into action. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, it's Eric from the Climify podcast. Are you feeling overwhelmed by climate doom? I am. That's why this season on Climify, I'm talking to 6 incredible women who are authors, CEOs, and everyday change makers who are tackling climate change with a side of optimism. They are proof there's real hope and real action happening right now. So listen to Climify wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Climify Podcast. Let's get inspired together.